At 78, Sally Field finally opens a window into a story the world has long admired but never truly understood. Smokey and the Bandit, released in 1977, made her a household name, a vibrant presence alongside Burt Reynolds, racing across highways, laughter and chaos spilling from every scene. To audiences, it was a rollicking adventure, a film that captured freedom, charm, and Hollywood sparkle. But behind the cameras, behind the smiles and the witty dialogue, there was a reality shaped by exhaustion, expectation, and the quiet weight of being a young woman navigating a world that demanded both perfection and spectacle. Field, whose career had already carried the echoes of early struggle and hard-won opportunity, was confronted with challenges few could see, lessons in resilience that would linger long after the applause faded. For decades, she carried the truth in private, tucked between memories of long shoots, grueling schedules, and moments of doubt that no script could capture. Now, with grace and reflection, she shares the story behind the story, revealing the human heart beneath the legend, the laughter and the tears woven together in the journey of Smokey and the Bandit. Sally Field was born in 1946 in Pasadena, California, into a world that was both nurturing and uncertain. Her early years were marked by the delicate balancing act of childhood innocence and the subtle pressures that would later define her resilience. From a young age, she carried a curiosity for performance, a spark that would not be dimmed by the everyday uncertainties of life. The daughter of Margaret Field, a teacher and actress, and Richard Field, a soldier and later a laborer, Sally grew up observing both determination and the fragility of human ambition. These early experiences shaped her understanding of discipline, perseverance, and the quiet courage required to navigate life's shifting tides. Her first steps into the world of performance were tentative yet instinctively confident. School plays, small local performances, and moments in front of family mirrors became the early laboratories of her craft. Even in these formative moments, she recognized the power of presence, the way an expression, a gesture, or a line delivered with sincerity could resonate far beyond the individual. It was an emotional education, subtle yet profound, laying the groundwork for the empathy and emotional intelligence that would later define her screen presence. By the early 1960s, Sally began to move deliberately toward professional work, exploring opportunities in television and commercials. She embraced the challenges that came with auditions, the careful readings, the long waits in casting offices, each rejection and acceptance etching lessons in patience and tenacity. Her youthful optimism was tempered by the understanding that talent alone was never enough. It required courage, adaptability, and an unwavering belief in oneself. Each role, no matter how small, became a building block, a step on a path toward not just fame but artistic authenticity. In 1962, Sally earned a breakthrough with television, appearing on shows that allowed her to experiment with character, timing, and presence. The early exposure to cameras and the professional demands of filming honed not only her craft but her resilience. She learned to navigate attention with composure, to find grounding in her identity amid the pressures of public scrutiny, and to protect the tenderness of her inner life, even as the outer world began to notice her talent. The emotional landscape of this period was complex, a blend of excitement, insecurity, and the quiet thrill of discovery. By the mid-60s, her reputation as a promising young actress was growing. She balanced the duality of ambition and self-preservation, understanding that Hollywood's embrace could be as precarious as it was exhilarating. It was during these years that Sally began to cultivate the qualities that would carry her through decades of intense work: empathy, emotional accessibility, and the willingness to bring her full humanity to each role. These were not lessons learned in classrooms or workshops but lived experiences, carved out through persistence, reflection, and an openness to the vulnerability required of a true performer. The foundation of Sally Field's early career was more than the pursuit of fame. It was the shaping of a woman who could carry emotional truth into every scene, who could inhabit characters with honesty and warmth. It was a journey that demanded courage, a willingness to confront both external expectations and internal doubts. These formative years were imbued with lessons in resilience, self-discovery, and the quiet artistry of observation. They set the stage for the moments that would later define her, including her iconic work in Smokey and the Bandit, where the culmination of talent, experience, and emotional depth would finally meet the world's gaze. Through it all, the young Sally Field carried within her a steady flame, a combination of curiosity, determination, and empathy that would not only guide her career, but anchor her humanity in an industry that demanded both spectacle and sincerity. The story of her early years is one of quiet courage, a narrative of preparation, patience, and the tender growth of an artist learning to navigate both life and performance with grace. By the time 1977 arrived, Sally Field had already carved out a reputation as a gifted actress, with a quiet emotional depth, yet nothing prepared her for the moment she stepped into Smokey and the Bandit. It was a film unlike anything she had done before, a lively, high-energy chase story wrapped in humor, heart, and the unpredictable rhythm of life on the road. When she accepted the role of Carrie, the runaway bride whose path collides with the Bandit, it marked a turning point in her career, not because of spectacle, but because it demanded a new kind of presence, one shaped by spontaneity, stamina, and trust. Working alongside Burt Reynolds placed Sally at the center of a production that was both exhilarating and unrelenting. Reynolds, already one of Hollywood's brightest stars, brought an unmistakable confidence to the set, a confidence that encouraged quick thinking and emotional flexibility. Jackie Gleason, with his commanding comedic timing, layered the film with a sense of unpredictability that kept cast and crew alert and engaged. Sally moved among these personalities with grace, carrying her own grounded sense of truth into scenes that swerved between comedy and danger, lightheartedness and intensity. The demands of filming struck her immediately. Smokey and the Bandit was shot primarily on the highways and backroads of the American South, where long days blurred into humid evenings, and where each scene required the careful choreography of cars, stunt teams, and cameras. Sally found herself performing in cramped Trans Am interiors, sprinting along dusty roads, and adjusting to the constant motion of a production that never seemed to rest. She approached each day with humility and determination, understanding that the physical strain was part of the story's authenticity. The heat, the noise, the unpredictable weather, all of it became part of the emotional texture she brought to the role. Yet the road did not simply test her endurance, it tested her balance. Sally was rising in her career, gaining the attention of audiences who saw in her an honesty that stood out in an industry defined by illusion. At the same time, she was navigating her life off-screen, carrying responsibilities and emotions that rarely paused for the demands of a film set. She learned to create small moments of stillness between takes, allowing herself to reset, to breathe, to stay connected to the deeper parts of herself. It was an emotional discipline, a quiet act of self-preservation amid the noise of fame. Despite the pressure, the work itself carried a certain joy. Cast camaraderie brought warmth to the long days, and the shared challenges created a sense of unity. Sally found strength in teamwork, in the knowledge that every member of the crew, from stunt drivers to camera operators, was pouring effort into a film that none of them expected to become a cultural landmark. They were simply doing the work, scene by scene, frame by frame, trusting the process more than the outcome. When Smokey and the Bandit was released in 1977, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Audiences embraced the humor, the energy, and the chemistry among the cast. The film became the second highest-grossing movie of the year, surpassed only by Star Wars, and its success rippled across the country with a momentum that surprised nearly everyone involved. For Sally, the acclaim carried both gratitude and humility. She understood that popularity was never guaranteed, yet she also recognized the way this film had touched people, offering laughter, escape, and a sense of freedom during a changing moment in American culture. Amid the whirlwind of fame, she remained grounded in her craft, holding close the lessons learned on southern highways, the resilience required to endure, the vulnerability required to connect, and the quiet strength needed to stay true to oneself. Smokey and the Bandit may have propelled her further into the public eye, but for Sally Field, it was the humanity within the work, the teamwork, the grit, the unexpected tenderness, that left the most lasting mark on her spirit. In the glow of Smokey and the Bandit's success, Sally Field stepped into a new kind of visibility, one that carried both privilege and profound emotional weight. Hollywood in the late 1970s remained a place where expectations pressed heavily on women, shaping not only their roles on screen but also the narrative that followed them off it. Sally understood this pressure intimately. Behind the applause, behind the recognition that came with a box office triumph, she faced the ongoing challenge of proving her depth, asserting her worth, and protecting her sense of self in an industry that often demanded more than it gave. Working on a high-profile production meant constant interaction with directors, producers, co-stars, and crew, each relationship layered with its own mix of creative energy and personal expectation. Sally brought a quiet steadiness to these interactions, approaching her work with respect and sincerity. She built trust gradually through consistency and a willingness to collaborate. Yet even as those relationships offered connection and support, they also exposed her to the unspoken hierarchies that governed Hollywood. She navigated them with sensitivity, doing her best to maintain dignity and clarity in environments where her voice could be overshadowed or misunderstood. Her relationships with co-stars held particular significance. The long hours, shared physical demands, and emotional vulnerability required during filming created a kind of temporary family, rooted in the momentum of the work. Conversations on set drifted between humor and exhaustion, between encouragement and quiet fatigue, forming bonds that held her through the most demanding days. Even so, Sally carried an awareness that these connections, however meaningful, lived within the boundaries of the project. When filming wrapped, the rhythms of life shifted again, and she returned to the delicate task of balancing personal commitments with professional obligations. The emotional toll of fame was something she felt most acutely in the quieter hours. Travel, interviews, and publicity tours blurred into one another, creating a sense of dislocation that made it difficult to fully rest. Physical stunts, though choreographed with care, left her drained, and the constant vigilance required to perform them safely only added to the weight she carried. Every success demanded renewed energy, renewed focus, renewed resilience. She learned to move carefully through each day, honoring the reality that her body and spirit needed rest even when schedules kept pulling her forward. Criticism, too, became part of her landscape. Fame invited attention from every direction, and not all of it was kind. She read reviews that evaluated her appearance more than her craft, and she heard commentary that reduced her work to stereotypes she had long been trying to escape. These moments stung, cutting into the quiet hopes she had nurtured for years. But Sally faced them with honesty, acknowledging the pain while refusing to let it change the core of who she was. She leaned on her training, her instincts, and the emotional truth she brought to every performance. In doing so, she found her own path through a world that often tried to shape her into something she was not. Amid all of this, the balance between her professional success and her family life remained a tender, ongoing challenge. Work took her far from home, sometimes for weeks at a time, and the separation weighed heavily on her heart. She cherished the moments she could carve out for those she loved, and she carried the ache of missing them, even on the brightest days of her career. It was a duality she accepted with grace, understanding that the cost of her ambition included a constant negotiation of time, energy, and presence. In those years, Sally Field lived in the intersection of triumph and vulnerability. She stood before cameras with strength, delivered performances that resonated deeply, and navigated the shifting tides of fame with humility. Yet behind it all, she remained profoundly human, shaped by the emotional price of success and the quiet determination to stay connected to the truest parts of herself. Through pressure, scrutiny, and the demands of a rising career, she kept searching for balance, carrying forward the understanding that her greatest strength came not from applause, but from the resilience she cultivated in the moments no one else could see. In the quiet clarity of her later years, Sally Field began to speak about Smokey and the Bandit with a depth that only time could provide. The film, released in 1977, had become a cultural landmark, beloved for its humor, its energy, and the irresistible chemistry she shared with Burt Reynolds. Jackie Gleason, Jerry Reed, and the rest of the cast helped create a world that audiences embraced with open arms. Yet for Sally, the truth of that experience had always lived beneath the laughter and the high-speed chase scenes, resting in the more fragile corners of her memory. At 78, she finally allowed herself to articulate what the film had truly meant to her behind the bright surface the public adored. She explained that Smokey and the Bandit was never just a project or a stepping stone in her career. It was a turning point, a moment when she found herself standing at the crossroads between the girl she had been and the woman she was becoming. Fame arrived like a sudden gust of wind, unsettling and exhilarating all at once. Audiences saw the sparkle of comedy, the confidence of a young woman stepping effortlessly into a demanding role. But behind the scenes, she was learning how to navigate the weight that came with being watched, admired, and judged on a national scale. Working so closely with Burt Reynolds brought its own emotional complexity. Their connection on screen was undeniable, and their professional partnership demanded trust, honesty, and vulnerability. Sally honored that truth without embellishment, acknowledging the craft and concentration required to create performances that felt alive and spontaneous. She remembered the long days on the road, the constant motion of shooting a film built around speed and movement, and the exhaustion that settled into her bones as she balanced the technical demands of comedic timing with the emotional work of staying grounded. The revelation she carried all those years was not a secret of scandal or conflict. It was something quieter, something deeply human. She admitted that while the world celebrated her rising star, she often felt the pull of conflicting identities. On set, she was the professional, the actress proving her range, the woman determined to break free from the limitations that had once defined her early career. Off-set, she struggled to maintain her boundaries, protect her sense of self, and cope with the constant hum of public expectation. She was learning in real time how to keep her humanity intact while fame threatened to bend her into shapes that did not belong to her. The pressure to be grateful, to be gracious, to keep smiling even when exhaustion blurred the edges of every day, became part of her experience. She carried that weight quietly, rarely expressing it at the time. It was only with age, and with the gentleness that comes from reflection, that she understood how hard she had been trying to hold everything together. At 78, she could finally speak to the vulnerability she once pushed aside, the moments when she felt overwhelmed, the effort it took to remain present in a whirlwind that did not slow down for anyone. Sharing her truth brought a sense of release. She spoke with warmth about the artistry of the film, acknowledging the craftsmanship of her co-stars and the joy audiences still found in it. Yet she also allowed herself to honor the young woman she had been, the one who had endured more than she let on, the one who kept moving forward even when the emotional cost felt steep. Her voice carried gratitude, but also honesty, as she described how the experience shaped her understanding of fame, boundaries, and self-worth. From the vantage point of 78 years, Sally could finally see the full picture. Smokey and the Bandit was a triumph, yes, but it was also a lesson in strength, in vulnerability, in the quiet courage required to remain human in an industry that often demanded perfection. By revealing the truth behind her smile, she offered something rare and deeply meaningful, a reminder that even the most iconic moments in film history are built on the tender, complicated reality of a human heart finding its way through the world. By the time Sally Field reached 78, her place in American cinema had already been carved with care, resilience, and decades of unforgettable performances. Yet longevity in Hollywood was never merely about staying visible for her. It was about continuing to grow, continuing to challenge herself, and continuing to protect the vulnerable truth of who she was beneath the roles, the applause, and the expectations. After Smokey and the Bandit, her career unfolded with a rare depth that reflected both artistic courage and emotional honesty. From her Academy Award-winning performance in Norma Rae, to the haunting tenderness of Places in the Heart, from her fierce portrayal in Steel Magnolias to her acclaimed work on television and stage, she showed the world that her craft was never confined to one chapter of her life. Through the years, she carried a quiet determination to expand her range, to choose roles that spoke to the complexities of womanhood, aging, grief, and resilience. She embraced the challenge of dramatic storytelling and the vulnerability required to bring those stories to life. This commitment made her not only an artist admired by audiences, but a model of integrity within the industry. Younger actors sought her guidance, finding in her presence a rare combination of wisdom and humility. She mentored quietly, offering advice when asked, sharing her experiences with a softness shaped by time, mistakes, triumphs, and the constant effort to remain human in a world that often demanded perfection. Beyond her work on screen and stage, Sally Field became an advocate for causes she believed in, speaking publicly about women's rights and the need for emotional honesty in conversations about mental health and aging. She used her platform not as a pedestal but as a bridge. She spoke not to impress but to connect, her words carrying the weight of lived experience and the compassion of a woman who understood what it meant to feel unseen or unheard. Advocacy became another form of storytelling, a way of giving voice to those who had been silenced, overlooked, or misunderstood. As her life widened, her gratitude deepened. She often reflected on the road she had walked as an actress, a mother, a daughter, and a woman learning to balance ambition with vulnerability. Fame had brought opportunities, but it also demanded boundaries she had learned, sometimes painfully, to define. In her 70s, she began speaking more openly about the emotional labor required to maintain a public life, the strength involved in raising a family while navigating work that consumed so much of her time and energy, and the necessity of forgiveness, of oneself and others. She shared that the greatest lesson she carried was not how to withstand pressure, but how to remain soft in a world that often mistook softness for weakness. She learned that honoring her feelings, acknowledging her limits, and giving voice to her truth were acts of courage, not retreat. And as she revealed her reflections at 78, she invited audiences to look past the icon and see the woman who had always been searching for balance, healing, and authenticity. Her perspective in later years was not shaped by nostalgia but by understanding. She looked back at her journey with tenderness, recognizing the young woman who once shouldered too much, the actress who pushed through fear to find her voice, and the advocate who used her experiences to uplift others. She was grateful for the roles that challenged her, for the filmmakers who believed in her, and for the audiences who embraced her through decades of change. In the quiet honesty of her 70s, she offered a final, gentle truth. Every performance, every award, every film that shaped the public's memory of her was only a fragment of the full story. The real legacy she hoped to leave was one of human connection, an invitation for people to see her not as a symbol, but as a woman who lived, learned, grew, and found her way through vulnerability toward a deeper sense of self. In the end, Sally Field's story is not defined by the fame she earned or the films that shaped generations, but by the quiet truths she carried through a lifetime of work, love, fear, and growth. Smokey and the Bandit may have catapulted her into a spotlight she never asked for, yet it also became the beginning of her understanding that being seen and being known were two very different things. At 78, her reflections offer something deeper than nostalgia. They reveal a woman who learned to honor her boundaries, embrace her voice, and protect the tender parts of herself that fame could never touch. Her journey across film, television, and theater became a testament to perseverance, while her advocacy and mentorship showed the strength of a heart committed to empathy. And as she shares her truth now, she reminds audiences that behind every iconic role is a human life unfolding quietly, bravely, and imperfectly. For more emotional stories, check out this video.